The year my family stopped inviting me to Christmas was the year I bought the biggest tree in Texas. My name's Samantha Ellison. I'm 29, and last December, my parents finally decided I wasn't good enough for the annual family gathering. They called it keeping the peace. I called it exile. When I inherited my godfather's ranch, all 200 acres of Texas sky and soil, they said I'd been manipulated, that I'd never manage it on my own. A year later, I hosted my own Christmas. I sent out invitations to everyone they'd ever ignore. The old neighbors, foster families, ranch hands, and the kind of people my parents pretended didn't exist. By noon, my front yard was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of barbecue. I stood under the 12-foot tree I'd cut myself, wearing a red flannel and a grin that felt like freedom. Then, just as the party hit its peak, a silver SUV rolled down my driveway. The woman who stepped out wasn't family, but she carried a letter that would tear mine apart. If this story caught your heart, make sure to hit subscribe so we keep bringing you stories that dig deep into truth, guilt, and redemption. And don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We read them all, and your words keep us going. You can't get uninvited from Christmas unless you make it easy for them. That's what I told myself the year my family finally cut me out for good. Last Christmas, I stood in the Ellison mansion surrounded by marble floors, gold ribbon, and people who smiled through their teeth. The smell of cinnamon candles couldn't cover the scent of tension, the kind that only comes when you're the odd one out in your own family. My father, Charles Ellison, raised his glass to toast his successful Ellison children. He looked at my brother Raya, his investment firm, his new Porsche, his fiancée, who spoke like a LinkedIn post, and beamed. Then his eyes slid past me as if I were a shadow in my own story. No mention of my small ranch. No nod to the land I was fighting to keep afloat. Not even a glance. Just a smile too tight to be real. When it came time for the family photo, Mom said it before I could move. "Oh, honey, maybe sit this one out. Just the main family for this one." Main family, as if I were an accessory. So I did. I stood behind the tree, holding a glass of untouched champagne, and watched my father's arm wrap around Ryan's shoulder. The flash went off, sealing me out of another perfect Ellison Christmas. I left that night early, my gift for Mom still wrapped in gold paper on the table. No one noticed. Not even when I waved goodbye. A year later, December came again, but the invitation didn't. Instead, I got an email. Subject line, holiday arrangements. My mother's tone was as polished as her pearls. "Dear Samantha, your father and I hope you are doing well on your little ranch project. We will be hosting Christmas as usual with the family this year, but we'd love to see you after the holidays when things calm down. Love, Mom, after the holidays." Like I was the mess they needed to clean up once the guests were gone. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Then a third time out loud, laughing in disbelief. I thought about replying, something sarcastic, maybe even cruel. But instead, I just sat there, staring out at my fields through the frosted window, horses grazing, snow falling over the fences I'd fixed myself. It was quiet here. Real. Mine. I realized something in that silence. They didn't exclude me because I failed. They excluded me because I stopped needing them. My hand hovered over the mouse for a moment. Then I clicked delete. The email vanished from the screen. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and smiled. "Fine," I said to the empty room. "I'll make my own Christmas." And I meant it. Because this year, I wasn't going to beg for a seat at their table. I was going to build my own, and everyone they ignored was invited. They said I'd never keep it. I made it thrive. That's the line that played in my head every morning when I walked out onto the porch and looked at the land Frank Price left me. 200 acres of wild Texas sky, open pasture, and the ghosts of people who once believed in me. Frank wasn't my blood. He was my godfather, a man who fixed tractors better than he fixed his own health, who taught me more about integrity than my entire family ever did. He didn't own much that glittered, but everything he touched meant something. When he passed, I thought the ranch would die with him. My parents certainly hoped so. They called it a financial burden. Too much work for a girl like you. They said I'd sell it within a year, but I didn't. I couldn't. I still remember the first winter after the funeral. The fences were sagging, the barn roof leaked, and I didn't have a clue how to run the place. I watched YouTube videos on tractor repair and called Frank's old foreman, a kind man named Luis, who refused to take a paycheck until I was on my feet. Frank would haunt me if I didn't help. He'd laugh. Bit by bit I learned. I fell, got back up, and learned again. I burned my hands on barbed wire, broke a boot heel in the mud, and once accidentally flooded the horse stalls. But by the next spring, the ranch was alive again. Horses running, fences fixed, bills paid. The land started to love me back. And with every sunrise, I heard Frank's voice in my head. You take care of the land, and it'll take care of you. Sometimes, when the wind rustled the tall grass, I swore I could still hear his boots in the dirt, that steady rhythm of a man who lived by simple rules and deep kindness. In the main barn, there's a loft I turned into a storage space. That's where I kept all of Frank's old boxes, tax papers, photos, and Christmas lights tangled like spaghetti. Last week, I climbed up there to look for ornaments. I wanted the tree in my living room to look like it used to. Mismatched, warm, full of stories. I opened an old tin marked holiday, and there it was. A single gold ornament, small and heavy. It wasn't shiny, just carefully polished. Etched into the side in tiny script were the words, "For those who remember kindness." I turned it over in my hand, my heart catching in my throat. It felt deliberate, like a message I wasn't ready to hear yet. As I dug deeper into the box, I found something else tucked underneath a stack of faded tinsel, a sealed white envelope, yellowed with age. Across the front, in Frank's careful handwriting, were the words, "Open only when they come." I stared at it for a long time, the ranch silent except for the crackle of the wind outside. Who were they? And why did I suddenly feel like this ranch wasn't done keeping secrets? I invited everyone my parents pretended not to know. That was the idea. The spark that lit everything that followed. After deleting my mother's email after the holidays, I stared out at the frost on the pasture and thought, fine. If they don't want me at Christmas, I'll throw my own. But not just for me, for everyone they'd ever looked down on. By noon that day, I'd already started planning. I dragged out old Christmas lights from Frank's barn, borrowed hay bales from Luis, and texted my best friend, Lena. Her reply came in seconds. Wait. A Christmas party? On the ranch? Please tell me this is out of spite. I grinned. Not spite. Justice. 2 hours later, she showed up in her beat-up truck with a box of tinsel, 2 Santa hats, and her usual chaos. Okay, she said, tossing me one of the hats. Walk me through this. Who's coming? Everyone who's ever been told they don't belong, I said. The ranch hands. The foster families from the town. The grocery clerk who always slips candy into kids' bags. The teachers who still work during holidays. And anyone else who wants a real Christmas, not a staged one. Lena raised an eyebrow. So basically, we're throwing the anti-Ellison Christmas. Exactly. We spent the next few days working non-stop. We hung garlands over the barn doors, wrapped fairy lights around the fences, and turned the horse troughs into drink coolers. The air smelled like pine and cinnamon from the candles we found in storage. Word started to spread fast. One person told another, then another. The town bakery offered pies for free. The mechanic's wife said she'd bring her choir. Luis showed up with a trailer full of folding chairs and a grin that said, "Told you this place needed noise again." By the time the sun went down on the 22nd, the ranch looked like something out of a snow globe, rustic, warm, alive. Lena stood beside me, hands on her hips. You realize this is going to make your parents' heads explode when they find out, right? I laughed, shaking my head. They'll never see it. They don't pay attention to anything that doesn't come with a country club membership. But then an idea crept in. A wild, impulsive, dangerous idea. I pulled out my phone, opened social media, and started typing. Christmas at Ellison Ranch open invite. Food, music, bonfire, gifts for the kids. Everyone's welcome. No dress code, no judgment, no lonely holidays. Lena's eyes widened. Sam, you didn't just post that publicly. I hit share before she could stop me. She groaned. Oh my God, you're going to go viral or get sued. Maybe both, I said with a smirk. By the time we finished cleaning up the barn, my phone was buzzing non-stop with comments, shares, and messages from strangers. Someone had already reposted it with the caption, "The girl who built her own Christmas." I didn't know it yet, but that post would reach far more people than I planned. And not all of them were coming to celebrate. My mom's tone could cut glass. I hadn't even finished my morning coffee when my phone started ringing. The kind of ringtone you don't forget because it always meant trouble growing up. Mom's cell. I stared at it for a second, debating whether to answer. Then I sighed and swiped. Hello? Vivian Ellison's voice hit like an icicle. "Samantha, what on earth are you doing?" I blinked. "Good morning to you too." "Don't be cute," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how many people have sent me that post? The public post? The one where you invited, what did you call them? Everyone?" I took a sip of coffee, calm as I could fake it. "Yeah, everyone. It's Christmas." She exhaled sharply through her nose, that sharp little hiss that used to precede every punishment in my childhood. "You're embarrassing this family. Delete it. Now." I laughed, short and quiet. "Mom, this family embarrassed itself years ago. I'm just decorating the aftermath." There was silence on the other end, then the sound of my father's voice in the background. "Put me on speaker," he said. "Charles wants to talk," she muttered as if it pained her. Dad's voice came through steady and cold. "Samantha, we're not calling to fight. We're calling because you're being reckless. You don't understand how inheritance looks to the press." I frowned. "Inheritance?" "Yes," he said. "The ranch, the estate, the Price Trust. People are watching these things. Investors, associates. You don't just throw open the gates to the world and invite chaos." I could almost see him pacing his study, tie loosened, drink in hand. "You've turned a respectable property into a circus," he continued. "You're making us look foolish." I set my mug down carefully, my heartbeat slow and deliberate. "Funny. I thought it was my property." He hesitated. "Technically, yes, but no, not technically," I cut in. "Legally, entirely, fully mine. You made that very clear when you didn't contest the will." Mom jumped back in, voice sharp again. "Samantha, this isn't about ownership. It's about perception. You can't just," I interrupted softly. "I can. And I will." She tried to soften her tone. "Sweetheart, please. Take down the post." "Do it for the family." I let the silence stretch long enough for her to realize she'd already lost. "You mean do it for your reputation," I said finally. Then I hung up. The room was suddenly too quiet. Outside, the horses were pacing near the fence, snow melting under their breath. I watched them for a moment. The freedom in their movement, unbothered, unowned. That's what I wanted. That's what I was protecting. My phone buzzed again, but it wasn't Mom this time. It was Ryan. "Ryan, you'll regret this, Sam." I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then I turned off my phone and whispered to no one. "You have no idea what I already regret." Outside, the first trucks of early guests were already pulling up. The party hadn't even started yet, and the war had already begun. The driveway turned into a parking lot of second chances. By noon on Christmas Day, the ranch looked like a living snow globe, except louder, messier, and a whole lot happier. Trucks, sedans, and even a few motorcycles lined up along the dirt road, headlights glinting against the frost. Kids ran between hay bales wearing Santa hats that were 2 sizes too big, and the smell of barbecue drifted all the way from the back pasture to the porch. Luis had built a bonfire that crackled bright against the gray sky. Lena had somehow convinced half the town's teenagers to hang lights from every fence post. Music played from a speaker we'd strapped to a feed barrel, and someone's dog wore reindeer antlers made out of pipe cleaners. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. For the first time in years, laughter filled a Christmas that actually meant something. No glass ornaments, no champagne flutes, no pretending, just people being people. I walked through the crowd, handing out mugs of cocoa and spare gloves, making sure everyone felt like they belonged. That was the rule of the day. No one eats alone. "Girl, you've officially gone rogue," Lena said, joining me with a plate of cookies shaped like Texas. This might be the most anti-Ellison thing that's ever happened. I smiled. Good. She tilted her head toward the gate. "You sure your family's not going to drive up here in their Range Rovers and shut it all down?" I shrugged. Let them come. They wouldn't know what to do with a real Christmas if it kicked them in the ego. But the truth was, I'd been thinking about that since morning. Every truck that rumbled up made me flinch a little, wondering if I'd see that familiar black sedan, the one my parents used to pull up in like they owned the world. To calm my nerves, I decided to finish decorating the big tree inside the barn, 12 feet tall, thick with pine scent and warmth. I climbed the ladder with the last ornament, the gold one Frank had left behind. It gleamed softly in the light, the engraving catching my breath again. "For those who remember kindness." I held it in my palm for a moment. "You'd love this, Frank," I whispered. "You'd love them." Then I hung it at the very top, the final touch. For a while, it was perfect. Music, laughter, everything he would have wanted, until it wasn't. I was refilling cocoa near the porch when the sound changed. The kind of silence that ripples through a crowd when something unexpected happens. Engines died. Conversation stopped mid-laugh. Down the driveway, a silver SUV was slowly pulling by, sleek, expensive, and unfamiliar. Its tires crunched against the gravel like a warning. The door opened, and out stepped a woman I'd never seen before. Mid-60s. Silver hair tucked neatly behind her ears, wearing a dark coat dusted with travel snow. She wasn't smiling. In her hand, she carried a worn brown briefcase, the kind that holds documents, not gifts. Lena leaned closer and whispered, "Who's that?" I stared at the woman as she looked right at me, steady, unblinking. "I don't know," I said softly. "But she's not here for cocoa. She said my godfather never died without finishing business." That's how the stranger introduced herself. Calm, clear, like she'd been rehearsing that line for years. She stepped closer, snow crunching beneath her boots, the crowd parting to make way. Her eyes were the same kind of steel gray as the winter sky. "I'm looking for Samantha Ellison," she said, scanning the faces until her gaze landed on me. "That's me," I answered slowly. "Who are you?" She nodded once. "Evelyn Price, Frank Price's sister." For a moment I couldn't speak. Frank never mentioned having family. Not once in all those years we worked side by side on this land. "I didn't know he had a sister," I said carefully. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a sigh. "Most people didn't. We were complicated." She set down her worn briefcase on the porch railing and pulled out a thick envelope, sealed with red wax, and stamped with Frank's old ranch emblem. My chest tightened. The symbol was the same one etched on the gold ornament hanging in my barn. "He told me to give you this," Evelyn said, her voice softening. "Said you'd know when the time was right." I hesitated. The crowd behind me was whispering, curious but respectful. I could feel Lena's eyes burning a hole in the side of my face. "What is it?" I asked. Evelyn handed me the envelope. A letter, his last one. My hands shook as I peeled back the wax. Inside was Frank's familiar handwriting, bold, careful, slightly slanted. "Sam, if you're reading this, then it means you've kept the ranch going, and that makes me prouder than I can say. But there's something I never told you, something bigger than the land. I left you more than fences and fields. I left you the truth about where it all came from. The ranch wasn't just mine to give. It was built on promises, some kept and some broken. When the time comes, you'll need to decide which kind of person you are. You'll know when that time arrives." "Frank," my throat tightened. The paper smelled faintly like cedar and tobacco, like the workshop he used to sit in for hours after dinner. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it back into the envelope. "Why now?" I asked Evelyn. "Why not when he passed?" She glanced toward the bonfire, her breath visible in the cold. "Because he made me promise to wait. He said you'd have to learn what family loyalty really means before you were ready." Her words hung heavy between us. Lena stepped closer, whispering, "Sam, what does that mean?" I didn't know. But something in Evelyn's eyes told me this night had just changed course. She picked up her briefcase and looked at me again, calm but serious. "You weren't the only one he helped," she said quietly. And just like that, every light from the bonfire flickered, like the truth itself had just stepped out of the dark. The letter didn't thank me. It warned me. That was the first thought that hit when I read it again. Slowly this time, each word sinking in like a cold nail. Frank hadn't written a goodbye letter. He'd written a map. I sat at the long oak table in the ranch kitchen with Evelyn across from me. The lights above us flickered slightly, the hum of the generator the only sound between us. Outside, I could still hear faint laughter from the bonfire, people dancing, unaware that my entire world had just tilted. I flattened the letter on the table. "Half the estate belongs to the rightful Ellison descendant who proves gratitude, not blood," I read aloud. "What does that even mean?" Evelyn's gaze was steady. "It means Frank believed family isn't about name or DNA. It's about character. He wrote that clause because he knew your parents would come after this place. And they did." I looked up sharply. "What?" She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thin stack of papers. "They tried to contest the will 2 years before he died. Claimed mental incompetence, undue influence, and said he was manipulated by you." My stomach twisted. "By me? I didn't even know he was sick." "I know," she said softly. "Frank told me. He said he saw the legal notice arrive in the mail, and he laughed. They can have my name," he told me, "but they'll never earn my trust." I sat back, shaking my head. My parents had always mocked the ranch, called it a money pit. And yet, behind my back, they'd tried to take it. The shock gave way to anger, slow and hot, like fire crawling under my skin. They already have everything, I said, my voice trembling. The business, the mansion, the money. Why come for this? Evelyn's eyes softened, but she didn't answer right away. She unfolded another document and slid it toward me. Because this land isn't just valuable, she said. It's the last piece of something they stole a long time ago. My hands hovered above the page but didn't touch it. What did they steal? Your godfather never told you about the original owner, did he? She asked. I frowned. He said his father started it. That's all. Evelyn nodded slowly, almost sadly. And who do you think your mother's maiden name was before she married Charles Ellison? I froze. I'm saying your mother lied about more than your inheritance, Evelyn said quietly. She lied about where she came from and what she took. The room felt suddenly smaller, the walls closing in. Somewhere outside, someone was still singing Christmas carols, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Evelyn leaned back, her voice a whisper. You were never supposed to inherit this ranch, Sam. Not because you weren't family, but because your mother made sure the truth about her family never saw daylight. And with that, every question I'd buried about my mother's past clawed its way to the surface, and I realized I'd just inherited more than land. I'd inherited a war. The woman who arrived wasn't a stranger. She was family. Evelyn didn't say it right away. She let the silence stretch until it became almost unbearable, until the hum of the old kitchen clock started to sound like thunder. I sat across from her, the letter still between us, my hands shaking slightly as the wind rattled the windows. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for years. There's no easy way to say this, Samantha. I'm not just Frank's sister. I blinked. Then who are you? Her eyes softened, and I saw something in them. A strange mix of sorrow and pride. I'm your grandmother. The words hit harder than I expected. My... what? She nodded, her voice trembling just enough to feel real. Frank's wife, my daughter, gave birth to twin girls 40 years ago. One died at birth. The other was given up for adoption under pressure. That baby grew up to be Vivian Ellison. My chest tightened. I shook my head as if I could physically push the words away. No. That can't be right. Evelyn slid an old black and white photo across the table. 2 babies in the arms of a tired-looking young woman, one wrapped in pink, one in white. Written on the back, Margaret and Vivian, 1983. That's impossible, I whispered. My mom said she came from money, old family wealth. She never mentioned any of this. Evelyn's mouth curved into something close to a smile, but it wasn't warm. She came from poverty. She married into money, and then built an empire using what wasn't hers. I stared at the photo again, the weight of her words pressing into my ribs. You're saying the Ellisons my family stole from Frank? Not just Frank, she said. From me, from the Prices, from the entire foundation this ranch was built on. She reached into her briefcase again, this time pulling out a stack of yellowed documents bound with a faded red ribbon. These are the land deeds from the early years. Your mother and father forged transfer papers after Frank's accident. They moved money, transferred stock, and created shell companies. Everything they have, the mansion, the business, the name, all trace back to this land. I wanted to speak, to ask how, to demand proof, but I couldn't form the words. My mother's voice echoed in my head. We earned everything we have, Samantha. Don't embarrass the family by acting small. Evelyn placed one more folder in front of me, thinner, but newer. Court records, she said quietly. Filed and buried 25 years ago. Look at the signatures. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding faster with each one until I reached the last sheet. There it was, in bold ink, Vivian L. Ellison. I felt the air leave my lungs. She signed this? Evelyn nodded. She forged Frank's consent, and then made him out to be senile when he tried to undo it. The paper shook in my hands. Everything I'd believed about my mother, her elegance, her control, her power, was suddenly rewritten in black and white lies. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice low, heavy with grief and warning. Your mother didn't just steal his fortune, Samantha. She stole his name, and she's been living off it ever since. And in that moment, I realized my Christmas party wasn't just rebellion. It was revenge, and I hadn't even known it yet. They didn't come for forgiveness. They came for control. By the time their black SUV pulled up the gravel drive, I already knew this wasn't a visit. It was a takeover. The bonfire had burned down to glowing embers, the guests long gone, leaving behind the faint smell of smoke and laughter that suddenly felt like a memory from another life. The doors opened in perfect sync. My father first, then my mother, and finally Ryan, stepping out like some twisted family tableau. Behind them, a man in a pinstripe suit carried a black briefcase. Vivian's heels clicked against the porch boards as she smiled tightly. "Samantha, darling," she said, voice sweetened and poisonous. "We heard you had a guest." Evelyn stood beside me, calm and unflinching. "You could say that," she replied. Dad stepped forward, his tone clipped. "We're not here to argue. We just want to resolve some misunderstandings about the trust." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If Mrs. Price would be kind enough to hand over the legal documents concerning Mr. Frank Price's estate, we can handle the distribution properly through the Ellison family offices." Evelyn tilted her head unimpressed. "You mean the offices built with stolen money?" My father's face darkened. "Watch your mouth, old woman." "Charles," my mother warned quietly, forcing another brittle smile. "Let's not make a scene." Then she turned to me. "Samantha, we're here to make peace. You're in over your head, and we just want to help you protect what's left of the family name." "By stealing it again?" I asked. Her jaw tightened. "By correcting a mistake." Frank was confused near the end. He wasn't confused," Evelyn interrupted sharply. "He was betrayed." The air in the room thickened. My brother stepped closer, smirking. "You think you're some hero now, Sam? Living on a ranch you don't even deserve?" I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Deserve?" I repeated. "I earned this place every day I got up before sunrise to fix what you all abandoned." Ryan's smirk faltered, but Dad waved the lawyer forward. "This is pointless. Sign the transfer, Samantha. The sooner this is over, the sooner we can forget all this nonsense." Evelyn moved before I could answer. She reached into her coat pocket and placed a small recorder on the table. "You might want to hear what Frank said about nonsense," she said. She pressed play. Frank's voice filled the room steadily, warmly, unmistakably. "If you're hearing this, then the same people who tried to take what wasn't theirs are back at it. I'm leaving my estate, all of it, to Samantha Ellison. Not because of blood, but because of the heart. The rest already took what they didn't earn. This time they don't get a second chance." Silence followed, sharp and absolute. My father's face drained of color. My mother's hand trembled against her pearls. Ryan's smirk disappeared entirely. For once, they couldn't talk their way out of it. Evelyn looked at me, a small, proud smile tugging at her lips. "Looks like the old man had the last word." I stood taller than I ever had in front of them. "You heard him," I said. "This land stays right where it belongs." Ryan's face twisted, fury finally breaking through his composure. "You'll never get away with this, Sam," he shouted, slamming his hand on the table before storming out the door. The SUV's engine roared to life outside, gravel spitting beneath its tires as it sped off into the night. Mom followed after him silently, but Dad lingered for one last look. Not at me, but at the house behind me. The house that would never be his again. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look away. Truth doesn't need witnesses. It just needs daylight. That's what Evelyn said when she pulled out the small black USB drive from her coat pocket, setting it gently on the table like it was a weapon. My parents had gone silent, pale and cornered. The lawyer was already fumbling with his briefcase, sensing the ground collapsing under him. Outside, the remaining guests had drifted closer to the porch, drawn by the tension they could feel in the air. Evelyn looked at me. "Frank didn't just write letters, Samantha. He left a record, one meant to outlive all of them." She plugged the USB into my laptop, and within seconds the screen lit up. There he was, Frank, sitting in his old chair in the barn office, the one I still couldn't bring myself to move. His voice was low, steady, filled with the kind of calm that comes only when a man has nothing left to hide. "If you're seeing this," he began, "then the vultures have come back. So let me make it clear one last time. This ranch, this land, and everything on it belong to Samantha Ellison. She's the only one who ever treated I and me with kindness." He paused, eyes glancing off screen, as if remembering something that still made him smile. "She didn't ask what she'd get out of it. She just showed up. When her family laughed at her for caring about dirt, she stayed. She mended fences, she fed the horses, and she never once asked for anything back. That's how you measure character, not by blood, but by gratitude." The Ellisons had their chance. They took what wasn't theirs. This time I'm setting it right. He lifted a folder into the frame, flipping it open for the camera. Legal documents signed and dated. The timestamp blinked clearly at the bottom of the screen, 3 weeks before he passed. For anyone questioning this, here's your proof. Deeds, transfers, bank records. Every page is organized and filed under Price Trust protection. It's done. The rightful heir is Samantha. And if they try to contest it again, well, he gave that crooked grin I remembered so well. They'll lose in daylight. The video ended. No one spoke for several seconds. The only sound was the faint hum of the computer fan. Then somewhere behind me a quiet clap. It spread slowly. Luis, then Lena, then half the crowd outside joined in. Applause for the man who told the truth louder than his enemies ever could. The lawyer cleared his throat, defeated. "There's nothing to contest here," he muttered, packing his papers. "My clients should withdraw immediately." Vivian turned away, trembling. My father looked like he'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. Ryan didn't even glance back. When they were gone, I turned to Evelyn. "Why tell me now?" She smiled faintly, eyes glistening in the firelight. "Because I'm dying," she said softly. "And you deserve the whole truth before I go." The wind outside picked up, rattling the windows like an old ghost sighing. And for the first time in my life, I realized truth wasn't just proof. It was freedom. Sometimes the final gift isn't money, it's clarity. That's what I kept thinking the morning we buried Evelyn Price on the hill behind the stables. The wind was sharp, carrying the scent of cedar and hay. And for the first time since Frank died, the ranch felt still, like it was holding its breath. She hadn't wanted a church or a sermon, just the land she'd written in her will, and the people who remember me kindly. A week earlier, she'd handed me a sealed envelope during her last hospital visit. Her hands were frail, her voice faint but steady. "Use it well," she'd whispered. "Heal what we broke." Inside was a handwritten note and a small key. The note didn't say what the key was for, only that it belonged to the future. After the funeral, I sat on the porch, the key dangling from my fingers, watching the sun melt into the hills. I finally understood what she meant by healing, rebuilding, not just land, but legacy. Within months, the back section of the ranch, the old East pasture, became the Hartman Art and Learning Center. We turned the barn into classrooms. The walls where cattle once stood now held easels and murals painted by local kids. Foster teens came after school to paint, learn, laugh, the kind of freedom I once craved at their age. Lena helped design it. Luis managed construction. The whole town pitched in. And for the first time, I stopped feeling like the girl who was left out of Christmas. I was building something that would outlive me. Of course, that's when the letters started coming. First from my mother, then my father, even Ryan. All of them are suddenly so proud of me, offering to help manage the foundation. Mom's note ended with, "It's wonderful, darling. You've really made something of yourself. Maybe it's time we put the past behind us." I folded her letter neatly and slid it into a drawer. Some things belong in silence. Weeks passed. The ranch hummed again, laughter, paintbrushes tapping, horses trotting in the distance. Then one afternoon, a delivery truck pulled up with a single parcel addressed in familiar handwriting. Evelyn Price. My breath caught. She'd written it before she died. Inside the package was another envelope, thin, delicate, sealed in blue wax. On the front, "For Samantha, when you think it's over." I opened it carefully. "You've done what we couldn't, Sam. You brought life back to this place, but there's still something buried here that you haven't found, something Frank wanted you to see. The key I gave you fits it. Look beneath the oldest tree on the western hill. You haven't found everything yet." My fingers tightened around the note, heart thudding. The last light of sunset spilled across the fields, golden and waiting. Whatever came next, it wasn't over. Not yet. The same mansion that once rejected me now had my name on the deed. I found out on a rainy Thursday, 2 weeks before Christmas. The letter came from the county records office, a legal update tied to Evelyn's estate. I almost tossed it in the stack with the others until I saw the address, 1034 Meadowbrook Drive, my parents' mansion. For a moment I thought it was a mistake, but inside was a notarized deed, showing Frank Price had quietly bought the property years ago through a trust, using shell names, probably to protect me from their wrath until the timing was right. And now, through Evelyn, it had transferred to me. The house that once pushed me away was mine. I laughed so hard I cried. Not because of revenge, but because of irony. Life has a wicked sense of humor. So that year, I did something unthinkable. I invited everyone from the ranch, from town, from the art center. The same people who once helped me fix fences and hang lights were now standing in the marble foyer of the Ellison mansion, eating pie off fine china and drinking cocoa out of crystal mugs. The chandeliers glowed. The fireplaces roared. Laughter echoed through every room that used to feel like a museum. Kids ran across polished floors, leaving sticky fingerprints on the walls. No one cared. "This," I said to Lena, "is what a Christmas should have always sounded like." She grinned. "Think your parents will see the invite online?" "Maybe," I said, smiling. "Maybe that's the point." By evening, the snow had started to fall. I was in the grand hallway, hanging the final ornaments on the giant tree that once stood at the center of every Ellison photo. And this time, at the very top, I placed 2 gold ornaments engraved with Frank's words, "For those who remember kindness." The front door creaked open behind me. The laughter dimmed slightly. My mother stood there in a gray coat, my father behind her, both frozen on the threshold. They looked older, smaller somehow. I could tell they hadn't come to fight, just to see what they'd lost. People parted quietly to make room for them, unsure of what would happen next. I walked over, calm and certain, and pressed the 2 ornaments into their hands. "These are for you," I said softly. My mother's lip trembled. My father's eyes flicked toward the staircase, the same one I'd once stood at as a kid, invisible. He whispered, "You did all this?" I nodded, with help. "The kind you can't buy." They didn't say another word. They didn't need to. I turned back toward the crowd, the music rising again, warmth filling every corner that used to echo with silence. They called me the disappointment, the outcast, but kindness built my world, and their cruelty paid for it. Family may give you blood, but truth gives you belonging. Subscribe for more stories of strength, secrets, and second chances.